The smell of charcoal smoke and lighter fluid hung thick in the August heat as I flipped burgers on the grill, watching 30 neighbors mill around our backyard like they owned the place. Ice clinked in glasses, kids shrieked in the pool, and my wife Hazel worked the crowd with that practiced smile she'd perfected during her law school years. Everything looked picture-perfect from the outside, just another suburban barbecue in Cedar Ridge, Texas. That's when she walked over with him. "Wes, I want you to meet Pierce," Hazel said, her voice carrying that forced brightness I'd learned to recognize. "He's my new gym partner I've been telling you about." Pierce Eldro stepped forward with the kind of confidence that immediately set my teeth on edge. 6'2", expensive haircut, wearing a polo shirt that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. He extended his hand with a grip that felt like a territorial challenge. "Great to finally meet you, Wes," he said, squeezing my palm just a little too hard. "Hazel talks about you all the time." I squeezed back, matching his pressure exactly, and looked him straight in the eye. Something about his smirk, the way he stood just a fraction too close to my wife, the casual familiarity in his voice. It all clicked into place like tumblers in a lock. "Nice to finally meet the guy from my wife's deleted texts," I said, loud enough for the entire backyard to hear. The silence that followed was absolute. Conversations died mid-sentence. The neighbor's kids stopped splashing in the pool. Even the cicadas seemed to pause their endless buzzing. 30 pairs of eyes turned toward us like we were the main event at a gladiator match. Hazel's sangria glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the concrete patio, sending red wine splashing across her white sundress. The sound of breaking glass seemed to snap everyone out of their frozen tableau. "Wes," she whispered, her face draining of color. "What are you talking about?" Pierce's confident smile faltered. He dropped my hand like it had caught fire and took a step back. "I think there's been some misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I said, keeping my voice calm and level. "Just good old-fashioned data recovery. Amazing what you can find when you know where to look." Pierce mumbled something about needing to leave early and practically sprinted toward the side gate. Our guests stood around, looking uncomfortable, unsure whether to pretend they hadn't heard anything or start asking questions. Mrs. Henderson from next door was already pulling out her phone, probably texting the neighborhood gossip chain. Hazel grabbed my arm. "Inside. Now." I handed the spatula to our neighbor Tom and followed her through the sliding glass door into our kitchen. The air conditioning hit my sweat-soaked shirt like a slap, and I could hear the murmur of confused voices starting up again outside. "What the hell was that about?" Hazel demanded, her mascara already starting to run despite her efforts to hold it together. I leaned against the granite counter and studied her face. After 12 years of marriage, I knew all her tells, the way her left eye twitched when she was lying, how she touched her neck when she felt cornered, the particular shade of red her cheeks turned when she was caught doing something she shouldn't. "You really want to do this here?" I asked. "With 30 people in our backyard?" "Do what? You just humiliated me in front of our entire neighborhood based on some paranoid fantasy. 3 weeks ago, you asked me to fix your phone because it was running slow," I interrupted. "Remember that? You said it was probably too many photos clogging up the memory." Her hand went to her throat. Tell number 2. So I did what any good husband would do. I ran a full diagnostic, cleaned up the cache, optimized the storage, standard IT maintenance. I pulled her phone from my pocket and set it on the counter between us. "But here's the thing about being a forensic data recovery specialist, Hazel. When you delete something, it doesn't really disappear. It just gets marked as available space. The actual data sits there until something else overwrites it." The color drained completely from her face now. "You had no right. I had every right. It's my name on the phone plan, remember? Besides, you asked me to fix it. I was just being thorough." I swiped to the recovered messages folder I'd created. 3 weeks of digging through deleted files, cross-referencing timestamps, piecing together fragments of conversations that painted a picture I really hadn't wanted to see. Should I read some of these out loud? Or do you want to explain why you and Pierce have been planning to force me to sell my father's lake house? Hazel's composure finally cracked. She sank into one of the kitchen chairs and buried her face in her hands. It's not what you think. Really? Because what I think is that my wife has been meeting with some guy behind my back, discussing ways to pressure me into selling the one piece of property I inherited from my dad. The place where I scattered his ashes. The place I specifically told you was never going on the market. Outside, I could hear car doors slamming as guests started making their excuses and heading home. Our barbecue was officially over, but honestly, that was the least of my concerns right now. The lake house is just sitting there, Hazel said quietly. We never use it. It's just eating money in property taxes and maintenance costs. That's not your call to make. We're married, Wes. We're supposed to make financial decisions together. Together, yes. Behind my back with some guy I've never met? That's not together. That's conspiracy. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Pierce is a real estate investor. He thinks he could get us twice what the property is worth if we're willing to sell to the right buyer. And what exactly is Pierce getting out of this generous offer? Silence. Come on, Hazel. I've got 3 weeks of deleted messages here. You want me to keep digging? Or are you going to start telling me the truth? She stood up abruptly and walked to the window overlooking our backyard. The last few guests were gathering their things, shooting curious glances toward the house. Tom was cleaning up the grill for me, bless him. Pierce and I used to date, she said finally. Before I met you, we stayed friends. Friends who delete their text conversations? Friends who didn't want to give you the wrong idea? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. The wrong idea? You mean the idea that my wife was secretly meeting with her ex-boyfriend to discuss selling my father's property without my knowledge or consent? Yeah, I can see how that might give someone the wrong idea. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Hazel? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like that. She turned around to face me, and for a moment I saw something in her expression that I'd never seen before. Something calculating and cold that made me wonder how long she'd been wearing a mask around me. The lake house is worth $400,000, she said. Maybe more to the right buyer. We could pay off the mortgage on this place, put the girls through college, maybe even buy that vacation condo in Florida we talked about. We never talked about a vacation condo in Florida. I talked about it. You just weren't listening. There it was, the real problem, laid out in one sentence. Not the lake house, not Pierce, not even the deleted messages. The problem was that somewhere along the way, my wife had decided I wasn't listening to her, wasn't giving her what she wanted, wasn't enough. So you decided to go around me. I decided to explore our options. With your ex-boyfriend. With someone who knows real estate. I picked up her phone and scrolled through more of the recovered messages. Is that what you call it? Because this one from last Tuesday says, "Can't wait to see you again. Wes is working late." That doesn't sound like real estate talk to me. Her face went white again. You're taking that out of context. What context makes that okay, Hazel? She didn't answer. Outside, I could hear Tom calling my name, probably wondering if everything was all right. I should go out there, thank him for cleaning up, apologize for the drama, but I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, staring at my wife of 12 years and realizing I had no idea who she really was. How long? I asked. How long what? How long have you been seeing him? I'm not seeing him. We're friends. How long have you been lying to me? That question hung in the air between us like smoke from the grill outside. Hazel opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. For the first time in our entire marriage, she seemed to be at a complete loss for words. My phone buzzed with a text message. Tom checking in. Everything okay in there? Happy to stick around if you need anything? I typed back, All good. Thanks for cleaning up. I'll call you later. But everything wasn't good. Everything was about as far from good as it could get. I was standing in my kitchen, looking at 3 weeks of evidence that my wife had been planning something behind my back with a man she'd conveniently forgotten to mention was her ex-boyfriend. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was the realization that I'd been so blind to it. I need some air, I said, heading for the back door. Wes, wait. We need to talk about this. No, Hazel, you needed to talk about this 3 weeks ago, or 3 months ago, or however long this has been going on. Right now, I need to think. I stepped outside into the humid Texas evening. The backyard was empty now except for Tom, who was loading the last of the folding chairs into his truck. Thanks for handling the cleanup, I told him. Sorry about the drama. Tom was a good neighbor, the kind of guy who minded his own business but was always ready to lend a hand when needed. He'd been at our wedding, helped me install the fence between our properties, borrowed my tools more times than I could count. No problem, he said. Everything all right? I looked back at the house, where I could see Hazel's silhouette in the kitchen window. She was on her phone now, probably calling Pierce to warn him about what had happened. Honestly, Tom, I have no idea. He nodded like he understood. Marriage is tough sometimes. Karen and I went through a rough patch a few years back. Counseling helped. Yeah, maybe. But even as I said it, I knew this was beyond counseling. This wasn't about communication problems or growing apart or any of the normal issues that couples work through. This was about trust, and once that was broken, I wasn't sure it could be fixed. After Tom left, I sat on my back porch in the gathering darkness, listening to the cicadas and trying to make sense of what I'd learned. The worst part was that I'd suspected something for weeks, but had convinced myself I was being paranoid. The late-night phone calls she'd take in the other room, the new gym membership she'd been so excited about, the way she'd started dressing differently, wearing perfume to work out. All the signs had been there. I'd just chosen not to see them. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. This isn't over. I stared at the message for a long moment, then saved the number under Pierce. Apparently, my little performance at the barbecue had gotten his attention. Good. Let him worry about what else I might have found. Because the truth was, I'd barely scratched the surface of those recovered files. 3 weeks of deleted messages was just the beginning. If I really wanted to dig, if I really wanted to know what my wife had been up to, I had the tools and the skills to find out. The question was whether I was ready for what I might discover. I spent that night in my home office, surrounded by the familiar glow of multiple monitors and the quiet hum of cooling fans. This was my sanctuary, the place where I did my best work, recovering lost data for insurance companies, law firms, and private investigators who needed to know what people thought they'd permanently erased. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now using those same skills on my own marriage. Hazel had gone to bed around midnight without saying another word to me. I'd heard her moving around upstairs, the creak of floorboards and the sound of drawers opening and closing. She was probably trying to figure out what else I might have found, what other digital breadcrumbs she'd left behind. She was right to be worried. I started with the obvious stuff, her laptop, her tablet, the cloud storage accounts linked to our family plan. Most people don't realize how much of their digital life gets automatically backed up these days. Photos, messages, browser history, location data. It's all there if you know where to look. The first thing I found was her real workout schedule. According to her calendar, she'd been going to the gym every Tuesday and Thursday evening for the past 4 months. But according to her actual location data, she'd only been to the gym twice in that entire period. The rest of the time, her phone had been pinging cell towers near the Marriott downtown. I cross-referenced those dates with Pierce's social media activity. Sure enough, every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 4 months, he'd been posting photos from the Marriott's rooftop bar. Sunset shots, craft cocktails, captions about unwinding after a long day. My wife had been meeting her ex-boyfriend at a hotel bar twice a week for 4 months, and I'd been so buried in work that I hadn't even noticed. But that wasn't the worst of it. I dug deeper into her browser history, following a trail of real estate websites, property valuation tools, and legal documents. That's when I found the shell company. Eldro Properties LLC, registered in Delaware 3 months ago. Pierce was listed as the managing partner, but the registered agent was someone named H. Trevon. It took me a moment to realize that Trevon was Hazel's maiden name, the name she'd legally changed when we got married 12 years ago. Or so I thought. I ran a quick search through public records databases, something I did routinely for work. What I found made my stomach drop. Hazel Trevon had never legally changed her name when we married. She'd been using Hazel Farrow socially, but legally, she was still Hazel Trevon, which meant she could sign contracts, open bank accounts, and create business entities without my knowledge. I pulled up the incorporation documents for Eldro Properties. The company had been created for a single purpose: to purchase residential real estate in the Cedar Ridge area for development and resale. The target property was specifically identified by tax parcel number. My father's lake house. I sat back in my chair, trying to process what I was looking at. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't even just about pressuring me to sell the property. Pierce and Hazel had created a company specifically designed to buy my father's lake house, presumably at below market value, then flip it for a massive profit. The question was how they planned to force the sale. I found the answer in a folder buried deep in Hazel's cloud storage, protected by a password that took me about 10 minutes to crack. Inside were legal documents, property assessments, and a detailed plan that made my chest tighten with anger. They were going to claim the lake house was a marital asset subject to division in a divorce. According to the documents, Hazel had already consulted with a divorce attorney. The strategy was simple: file for divorce, claim half the value of all marital property, including the lake house, then force a sale to split the proceeds. Pierce's company would be positioned to make the highest bid, ensuring they got the property at the lowest possible price. I would lose my father's house, and they would make a fortune. The plan was actually brilliant in its simplicity. Even if I fought it in court, the legal fees would probably cost more than my half of the property was worth. And since Texas was a community property state, Hazel had a legitimate claim to half of everything we'd acquired during our marriage. The only problem with their plan was that they'd underestimated me. I spent the next 3 hours documenting everything I'd found, creating a digital paper trail that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. Screenshots, file exports, metadata analysis, the whole 9 yards. By the time I was finished, I had enough evidence to prove that my wife and her ex-boyfriend had been planning to defraud me for months. But I wasn't ready to play that card yet. Instead, I decided to do a little more digging. If Hazel had been lying about this, what else had she been lying about? I started with Pierce Eldro himself. A basic background check revealed some interesting facts. He'd been married twice before, both marriages ending in messy divorces involving disputed property settlements. His first wife had accused him of hiding assets. His second wife had filed a restraining order. Pierce wasn't just a real estate investor. He was a predator who specialized in targeting married women with valuable assets. I dug deeper into his business history and found a pattern. Over the past 10 years, Pierce had been involved in at least 6 property deals where he'd somehow convinced married women to sell their homes or other real estate at below-market prices. In each case, the woman had filed for divorce shortly after the sale. My wife wasn't his first victim. She was just his latest mark. The sun was coming up by the time I finished my research. I could hear Hazel moving around upstairs, getting ready for work. In a few hours, she'd probably call Pierce to tell him about our conversation, to strategize about how to handle the fallout from the barbecue. Let her call. I was ready for whatever came next. I printed out the most damning documents and locked them in my office safe, then uploaded encrypted copies to a secure cloud server that only I could access. If something happened to the originals, I'd still have proof of what they'd been planning. My phone buzzed with a text from Hazel. "We need to talk when I get home tonight." I typed back, looking forward to it. But first, I had some calls to make. I started with my business partner, Brooks Carvin. We'd been running our data recovery firm together for 8 years, and I trusted him completely. If anyone would know how to handle this situation, it would be Brooks. "Jesus, Wes," he said after I'd explained the situation. "Are you sure about all this?" "I've got documentation going back 4 months, bank records, location data, business filings, the works. What are you going to do?" "Honestly, I'm not sure yet. But I wanted to give you a heads up in case this gets messy. If Hazel goes through with the divorce, she might try to claim part of the business as a marital asset." "Can she do that?" "Probably not, since you're an equal partner and the business predates our marriage. But she might try." Brooks was quiet for a moment. "You want me to talk to our lawyer? Make sure all our corporate documents are in order?" "That's probably a good idea." "And Wes, I'm sorry, man. This really sucks." After I hung up, I called my father-in-law. George Trevon was a retired accountant who'd always treated me like the son he'd never had. If anyone deserved to know what his daughter was planning, it was him. "Wes, everything all right? Susan said there was some kind of commotion at your barbecue yesterday." Word traveled fast in our neighborhood. "Actually, George, that's why I'm calling. I need to tell you something about Hazel, and you're not going to like it." I gave him the condensed version, focusing on the business documents and the plan to force the sale of the lake house. I left out the more personal details about the hotel meetings, but I made sure he understood that this wasn't just a marital disagreement. "My daughter wouldn't do something like that," he said when I finished. "I can send you the documents if you want to see them yourself." Another long silence. "Send them." I spent the rest of the morning organizing my evidence and preparing for whatever confrontation was coming. Hazel had texted twice more, asking if we could meet for lunch, but I'd ignored both messages. I wasn't ready to tip my hand yet. Instead, I drove out to the lake house. The property was about an hour north of Cedar Ridge, nestled in the pine trees along the shore of Lake Buchanan. My father had bought it in the 1980s as a weekend retreat, spending countless hours teaching me to fish from the old wooden dock. After he passed 5 years ago, I'd kept it as a memorial to him, a place where I could go to think and remember. The house itself wasn't much to look at, a small cabin with 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen that hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. But the location was spectacular, with 100 feet of private shoreline and views that stretched for miles across the water. I could see why Pierce thought it would be valuable. Waterfront property in this area was selling for premium prices, especially to developers who wanted to tear down the old cabins and build luxury vacation homes. Absolutely not. I spent an hour walking the property, checking the boundaries and making sure everything was secure. If Pierce and Hazel were planning to force a sale, I wanted to make sure they couldn't claim the property was abandoned or neglected. On the drive back to town, my phone rang. It was Brooks. "I talked to our lawyer," he said. "The good news is that your wife can't touch the business. We've got ironclad partnership agreements, and since the company was established before your marriage, it's not a marital asset." "What's the bad news?" "The bad news is that if she's really planning what you think she's planning, you need to get ahead of it. File first, control the narrative, protect your assets before she can make a move." "I'm not ready to file for divorce yet." "Then what are you ready to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? I had enough evidence to destroy both Pierce and Hazel, but I wasn't sure I wanted to use it. Despite everything, she was still my wife. We'd built a life together, had 2 daughters who didn't deserve to see their family torn apart. But she'd made her choice when she started planning to steal my father's house. "I'm going to give her a chance to come clean," I said finally. "Tonight, when she gets home. If she tells me the truth, Maybe we can work something out. And if she doesn't? Then I'm going to show her exactly what happens when you try to con a forensic data recovery specialist. Brooks laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Just be careful, Wes. People do crazy things when they're cornered. I thought about that as I drove home. Was I cornering her? Or was I just finally seeing the corner she'd been backing me into for months? Either way, tonight was going to be interesting. Hazel came home at 7:30 with takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant, the same place we'd had our first date 13 years ago. She'd changed out of her work clothes into jeans and the blue sweater I'd bought her for Christmas, and she was wearing the perfume she knew I liked. She was trying to seduce me into forgiveness. "I thought we could eat and talk," she said, setting the bags on the kitchen counter. "Clear the air about yesterday." "Sure," I said, though I'd lost my appetite somewhere around the time I'd discovered her secret business partnership with her ex-boyfriend. We ate in relative silence, making small talk about our daughters and work and everything except the elephant in the room. Hazel kept shooting me nervous glances, probably trying to gauge my mood and figure out her next move. Finally, she put down her fork and looked at me directly. "About Pierce," she said. "I owe you an explanation." "I'm listening." "We dated in college before I met you. It was serious for a while, but we wanted different things. He was always focused on making money, building his business. I wanted something more stable. So you chose me. I chose you because I loved you, because you were kind and honest and everything he wasn't. Was, past tense, interesting choice of words. But you stayed in touch with him. We lost contact for years. Then about 6 months ago, he reached out through social media. He was going through a divorce, feeling lonely. We started talking, just as friends. Friends who meet at hotel bars. Her cheeks flushed red. How did you... Never mind. Yes, we met a few times, but it wasn't what you think. What do I think, Hazel? You think we're having an affair. Are you? She hesitated for just a fraction of a second, but it was enough. No, we're not having an affair. But you're thinking about it. Another hesitation. It's complicated. I leaned back in my chair and studied her face. This was the moment of truth, the point where she could either come clean or dig herself deeper into the hole she'd created. Tell me about Eldro Properties, I said. The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. What? Eldro Properties LLC, Delaware Corporation. Pierce Eldro, Managing Partner. H. Trevin, Registered Agent. Ring any bells? She didn't answer, but her left eye started twitching. Here's what I think happened, I continued. Pierce reached out to you because he'd done his research. He knew you were married to someone who owned valuable real estate. He knew you still used your maiden name legally, which meant you could sign documents without my knowledge. He seduced you into thinking you deserved better than what you had, then convinced you to help him steal my father's house. It's not stealing. What would you call it? It's a business opportunity. The lake house is just sitting there, Wes. We never use it. It's costing us money every month in taxes and maintenance. It's not costing us anything. I pay for it out of my personal account, not our joint account. We're married. There's no such thing as personal accounts. There is, when your wife is planning to divorce you and steal half your assets. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Hazel's mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound came out. She looked like a fish gasping for air. I found the legal documents, I said quietly. The divorce strategy, the property valuation, the plan to force a sale. I know everything, Hazel. She buried her face in her hands and started crying. Not the pretty, delicate tears of a woman trying to manipulate her husband, but the ugly, choking sobs of someone whose carefully constructed lies had just collapsed around her. I never meant for it to go this far, she said through her tears. It started as just an idea, a way to maybe get some extra money for the girls' college funds. By divorcing me and stealing my inheritance. by liquidating an asset that we never use. My father's house, Hazel, the place where I scattered his ashes. I know. I know how much it means to you. That's why I thought maybe if we could find a way to make it seem like your idea, make what seemed like my idea, the divorce or the sale. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. The sale. I wasn't going to divorce you. That was just Pierce's idea, a backup plan in case you wouldn't agree to sell voluntarily. So you were planning to manipulate me into selling, and if that didn't work, you were going to divorce me and force a sale. When you put it like that, it sounds terrible. It is terrible, Hazel. It's fraud. It's conspiracy. It's theft. Pick your favorite felony. She wiped her nose with her napkin and tried to compose herself. What do you want me to do? I want you to tell me the truth. All of it. How long have you been planning this? How much money were you going to make? What else have you been lying about? She took a shaky breath. Pierce contacted me 8 months ago. He said he'd been thinking about me, wondering how I was doing. We started texting, just casual conversation at first. Then he mentioned that he was in real estate development, that he was looking for investment opportunities in the Lake Buchanan area. And you told him about the lake house. I mentioned it, yes. He asked if we'd ever considered selling, said the market was really hot for waterfront property. I told him you'd never agree to it, that it had sentimental value. So he suggested the divorce plan. Not right away. First, he wanted to see the property, get a sense of what it might be worth. So I took him out there one afternoon when you were working. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. She'd taken another man to my father's house, the most sacred place in my world, and let him evaluate it like a piece of merchandise. When? I asked. About 6 months ago. What did he think? He said it was perfect for what he had in mind. The cabin itself isn't worth much, but the location is incredible. He said he could probably get $2 million for it if he tore down the cabin and built something modern. $2 million. No wonder Pierce was willing to go through such an elaborate scheme to get his hands on the property. So you agreed to help him. I agreed to think about it. He said we could split the profits 50-50 after his company bought it from us. Even after paying capital gains taxes, we'd walk away with close to $1 million. We, or you and Pierce? She didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. How much of that $1 million were you planning to share with me, Hazel? It would have been community property. You would have gotten half. Half of what was left after you and Pierce took your cuts. It's not like that. Then what is it like? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you and your ex-boyfriend were planning to steal my father's house, tear it down, build some monstrosity in its place, and split the profits. And the only reason you were going to give me anything at all is because Texas law requires it. She started crying again, but I was done feeling sorry for her. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. I want you out, I said. What? Out of this house, tonight. Go stay with your parents, go stay with Pierce, I don't care. But I want you gone. Wes, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling, We can't work this out, Hazel. You betrayed me in the worst possible way. You conspired with another man to steal the one thing in this world that I would never sell. You planned to divorce me and take half of everything I've worked for. You lied to me for 8 months. I never meant to hurt you, but you did, and now you have to live with that. She stood up slowly, like an old woman with arthritis. What about the girls? What about them? Are you going to tell them what happened? I thought about our daughters, Emma and Sophie, both away at college and blissfully unaware that their parents' marriage was imploding. They didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this mess, but they also deserved to know the truth about their mother. I'm going to tell them that we're having problems and we're taking some time apart. The details are between you and me. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This isn't over, Hazel. You and Pierce created a company to defraud me. You planned to steal my property. There are going to be consequences. What kind of consequences? I stood up and started clearing the table, dumping our half-eaten dinner into the trash. That depends on what Pierce does next. If he walks away and dissolves the company, maybe we can work out a quiet divorce and put this behind us. If he decides to fight, if he tries to salvage his plan somehow, then I'm going to destroy both of you. You can't prove anything. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Hazel, I'm a forensic data recovery specialist. I can prove everything. I've got 8 months of deleted text messages, location data that shows every time you met with Pierce, financial records showing the creation of your shell company, and legal documents outlining your entire plan. I could have you both arrested tomorrow if I wanted to. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She sank back into her chair and stared at me with something approaching terror. "What do you want?" she whispered. "I want my father's house to stay in my family. I want you to dissolve Eldro Properties and return any money you've invested in it. I want Pierce to disappear from our lives completely, and I want you to sign a post-nuptial agreement giving up any claim to the lake house or my business. And if I do all that, then maybe we can have a civilized divorce. Maybe I won't press charges. Maybe our daughters won't have to visit their mother in prison." She flinched, like I'd slapped her. "You wouldn't. Try me." We stared at each other across the kitchen table. Two people who'd once promised to love each other forever, now negotiating the terms of our mutual destruction. It was surreal and heartbreaking and absolutely necessary. "I need time to think," she said finally. "You have until tomorrow night. After that, I'm filing for divorce and sending copies of everything I've found to the district attorney's office." She nodded and stood up again. "I'll pack a bag." "Hazel?" She turned back to look at me. "For what it's worth, I really did love you. I would have done anything for you, given you anything you wanted. All you had to do was ask." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I know. I'm sorry. So am I." I watched her walk upstairs to pack, then sat alone in my kitchen listening to the sound of drawers opening and closing, hangers rattling in the closet, the quiet sounds of a marriage ending. 20 minutes later, she came back downstairs with a suitcase and her laptop bag. "I'll call you tomorrow," she said. "Make sure you do." After she left, I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat on my back porch, looking out at the empty yard where just 24 hours ago we'd been hosting a barbecue for our friends and neighbors. Everything had changed so quickly that I was having trouble processing it all. My phone buzzed with a text from Pierce. "We need to talk." I typed back, "No, we don't. This doesn't have to get ugly. It's already ugly. The question is how ugly you want it to get." I'm trying to be reasonable here. Reasonable would have been not trying to steal my property in the first place. My phone rang. Pierce calling. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. "Look, Wes, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Hazel and I are friends, nothing more. The business opportunity we discussed was legitimate, a way for you to maximize the value of an underutilized asset. I'd like to sit down with you and explain the whole situation. Maybe we can work something out that benefits everyone." I deleted the message and blocked his number. I was done talking to Pierce Eldro, but I had a feeling he wasn't done talking to me. I woke up the next morning to find my truck's tires slashed and "Psycho" spray-painted across my garage door in bright red letters. Pierce had apparently decided that reasonable negotiation wasn't his strong suit after all. I took photos of the damage and called the police to file a report, though I doubted they'd be able to prove Pierce was responsible. He was too smart to get caught on security cameras, and I hadn't installed any surveillance equipment around my house. That was about to change. Officer Martinez took my statement and examined the vandalism with the weary expression of someone who'd seen too much domestic drama. "Any idea who might have done this?" "My wife's business partner," I said, handing him a printout of Pierce's driver's license photo. "Guy named Pierce Eldro. We had a disagreement yesterday about some real estate." "You want to press charges if we can prove he did it?" Absolutely. After the police left, I called a towing company to haul my truck to the tire shop, then spent an hour online ordering a comprehensive security system for the house. Cameras, motion sensors, automatic alerts to my phone, the full package. If Pierce wanted to escalate things, I was going to make sure I had evidence of every move he made. My phone rang while I was waiting for the Uber to take me to work. It was George Trevon, my father-in-law. "I looked at those documents you sent," he said without preamble. "I can't believe my daughter would do something like this." "I'm sorry, George. I know this is hard to hear." "Hard to hear? Wes, this is devastating. Susan and I raised Hazel to be honest, to value family, to respect other people's property. This isn't the girl we thought we knew. People change. Not like this. Not this much." He was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" "That depends on what Hazel decides. I gave her until tonight to make things right. And if she doesn't? Then I'm going to file for divorce and let the chips fall where they may." "What about the criminal charges? That business with the shell company? That's fraud, isn't it?" "Probably, but I'd rather handle this quietly if possible for the girls' sake." George sighed heavily. The girls. God, what is this going to do to Emma and Sophie? They're strong kids. They'll get through it. Will you? Get through it, I mean. That was a good question. 24 hours ago, I'd thought I had a solid marriage and a stable life. Now I was dealing with vandalism, conspiracy, and the complete collapse of everything I'd thought was real. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I'm going to try." The Uber dropped me off at my office, where Brooks was waiting with coffee and a concerned expression. "Rough night?" he asked, taking in my appearance. I told him about the tire slashing and the spray paint, the confrontation with Hazel, and Pierce's attempts to contact me. "This guy sounds like bad news," Brooks said. "Maybe you should consider getting a restraining order." "Based on what? I can't prove he vandalized my truck." "Based on the fact that he's been stalking your wife for 8 months and trying to steal your property." "Stalking is a strong word." "Is it? Think about it, Wes. This guy researched your family, identified your most valuable asset, then seduced your wife into helping him steal it. That's not a business opportunity. That's a long-term criminal enterprise." I hadn't thought about it that way, but Brooks was right. Pierce hadn't just randomly reconnected with an old girlfriend. He'd targeted Hazel specifically because she was married to someone who owned something he wanted. "I need to dig deeper into his background," I said. "Find out if he's done this before." "Want some help?" "I thought you were worried about the business getting dragged into this." "I am. But you're my partner and my friend. If some con artist is trying to destroy your life, then he's messing with my life too." We spent the morning running background checks on Pierce Eldro, using the same databases and investigative tools we employed for our corporate clients. What we found was even worse than I'd expected. Pierce had been married 4 times, not twice as I'd originally discovered. Each marriage had ended with the wife losing significant assets in the divorce settlement. In 2 cases, the women had filed police reports alleging that Pierce had manipulated them into signing over property or business interests, but no charges had ever been filed. "This guy is a professional," Brooks said, scrolling through the court records. "Look at this pattern. He targets women with assets, marries them or gets them into relationships, then finds ways to separate them from their money. But he's never been convicted of anything. Because he's smart about it. He makes it look like legitimate business deals or normal divorce settlements. The victims probably don't even realize they've been conned until it's too late." I studied Pierce's financial history, tracking his various business ventures over the past 15 years. He'd been involved in dozens of real estate deals, always as a buyer or developer, always making substantial profits. But when I dug into the details, a disturbing pattern emerged. In almost every case, the properties he'd acquired had been sold to him by recently divorced women at below-market prices. "He's been doing this for years," I said. "Targeting married women, breaking up their marriages, then buying their property cheap in the divorce settlement. and now he's trying to do it to you. Not if I stop him first. My phone buzzed with a text from Hazel. Can we meet for lunch? I have an answer for you. I showed the message to Brooks. What do you think? I think you should meet her somewhere public, record the conversation, and make sure you're not walking into an ambush. You think Pierce might be with her? I think Pierce is desperate, and desperate people do stupid things. I texted back, noon at Murphy's Diner, come alone. Murphy's was a family restaurant in the middle of town, the kind of place where half the customers were cops and the other half were church ladies. If Pierce was planning anything violent, he'd have to be suicidal to try it there. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a booth in the back corner where I could see the entire restaurant. The lunch crowd was just starting to arrive, and the familiar sounds of clinking silverware and quiet conversation filled the air. Hazel walked in at exactly noon, looking like she hadn't slept in a week. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes, and she was wearing the same clothes she'd had on when she left the house the night before. She slid into the booth across from me and folded her hands on the table. I talked to Pierce. And he's not going to back down. He says he's invested too much time and money in this deal to walk away now. What did you tell him? I told him it was over, that I couldn't go through with it, that I didn't want to hurt you any more than I already had. How did he take that? Not well. He reminded me that I'd signed documents, that I was legally committed to the partnership. He said if I tried to back out now, he'd sue me for breach of contract. I almost laughed. He's going to sue you for refusing to help him commit fraud? He doesn't see it as fraud. He sees it as a legitimate business deal that you're trying to sabotage. What do you see it as, Hazel? She was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her hands. I see it as the biggest mistake of my life. The waitress came over to take our order, but neither of us was hungry. We ordered coffee and waited for her to leave before continuing the conversation. Pierce thinks you're bluffing, Hazel said. He doesn't believe you'll actually press charges or file for divorce. He thinks you love me too much to destroy our family. What do you think? I think he doesn't know you very well. I think he's underestimated how stubborn you can be when someone threatens something you care about. The lake house isn't just something I care about, Hazel. It's the last piece of my father I have left. Pierce wants to tear it down and build some McMansion in its place. I'd rather burn it to the ground myself than let that happen. I know. I should have realized that from the beginning. You did realize it. That's why you and Pierce came up with the divorce plan. You knew I'd never sell voluntarily. She flinched like I'd hit her. You're right. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this, Hazel. Sorry doesn't undo 8 months of lies and betrayal. Then what does? What do you want from me? I want you to dissolve the company, return any money Pierce invested, and sign a statement admitting that the whole thing was a scheme to defraud me. Then I want you to disappear from my life. And if I do that, you won't press charges? I won't press charges against you. Pierce is a different story. He'll never agree to just walk away. Then he's going to find out what happens when you try to con someone who has access to federal law enforcement databases. Hazel's eyes widened. What do you mean? I mean, Pierce Eldro has been running this scam for 15 years, and I can prove it. I've got documentation of at least a dozen similar cases, all following the same pattern. The FBI has a task force that specializes in this kind of thing, and they're going to be very interested in what I've found. You'd really do that? Turn him over to the FBI? In a heartbeat. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. Let me call him. Maybe I can convince him to be reasonable. Put it on speaker. She dialed Pierce's number and set the phone on the table between us. He answered on the second ring. Hazel? Thank God. I was starting to worry that your husband had done something to you. I'm fine, Pierce. I'm sitting here with Wes right now, and we need to talk. About what? About ending this. About walking away from the whole thing. There was a long pause. We've been through this, Hazel. We have contracts. We have obligations. We have a criminal conspiracy, I said, loud enough for the phone to pick up. And if you don't walk away right now, I'm going to make sure you spend the next 10 years in federal prison. Wes, how nice to finally have a conversation. I was hoping we could work something out like reasonable adults. Reasonable adults don't slash tires and spray paint houses. I have no idea what you're talking about. Sure you don't. Here's what's going to happen, Pierce. You're going to dissolve Eldro Properties, return any money my wife invested, and stay away from my family. If you do that, I might consider not sending your entire criminal history to the FBI. Pierce laughed. You're bluffing. You don't have anything on me. I have 15 years of marriage fraud, property manipulation, and financial exploitation. I have the names and contact information for at least 6 of your previous victims. I have bank records, court documents, and business filings that show a clear pattern of criminal behavior. The laughter stopped. Those were legitimate business transactions. Tell it to the federal prosecutor. Another long pause. What exactly are you proposing? I'm not proposing anything. I'm telling you what's going to happen. You have 24 hours to dissolve the company and disappear. After that, I'm making some phone calls. And if I refuse, then you're going to find out why they call it the federal prison system. I reached over and ended the call, then looked at Hazel. There. You tried to reason with him. Now we do this the hard way. He's not going to give up, Wes. He's too invested in this. Then he's going to go down hard. We sat in silence for a few minutes, sipping our coffee and avoiding eye contact. Finally, Hazel spoke. What happens to us now? There is no us anymore, Hazel. You made sure of that when you decided to help Pierce steal my father's house. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far, and now we have to deal with the consequences. What about the girls? What about them? When are you going to tell them? When I have to. Hopefully after this mess is resolved and Pierce is out of the picture. They're going to hate me. Maybe. Or maybe they'll understand that people make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes have serious consequences. Hazel started crying again, quiet tears that she tried to hide by looking down at her coffee cup. I've ruined everything, haven't I? Yes, I said. You have. It was harsh, but it was also the truth. She'd destroyed our marriage, betrayed my trust, and conspired to steal the one thing in the world that meant more to me than money. There was no coming back from that. I should go, she said, standing up and reaching for her purse. Hazel? She looked back at me. For what it's worth, I hope you figure out what you really want out of life. Because whatever it is, you're not going to find it with Pierce Eldro. She nodded and walked away, leaving me alone with my coffee and the wreckage of 13 years of marriage. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This isn't over. I saved the number under Pierce and typed back, 23 hours and counting. Then I called Brooks and told him to clear his schedule. We had work to do. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of phone calls, document preparation, and strategic planning. Brooks and I worked through the night, building an airtight case against Pierce Eldro that would make a federal prosecutor salivate. We compiled evidence of his previous scams, documented his pattern of targeting married women with valuable assets, and traced the money trail through his various shell companies and business partnerships. By morning, we had a file thick enough to choke a horse and damning enough to put Pierce away for a very long time. But Pierce wasn't going quietly. At 6 a.m., my new security system alerted me to motion in my backyard. I pulled up the camera feed on my phone and saw Pierce himself, dressed in dark clothes, trying to jimmy the lock on my back door. I called 911 first, then grabbed the baseball bat I kept beside my bed and headed downstairs. By the time I reached the kitchen, Pierce had given up on the lock and was peering through the windows, probably trying to figure out if I was home. I flipped on the back porch light and stepped outside. Looking for something, Pierce? He spun around, startled, then tried to compose himself. "Wes, I was hoping we could talk." "At 6 in the morning? By breaking into my house?" "I wasn't breaking in. I was just—" "You were just what? Taking an early morning stroll through my backyard?" Police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Pierce heard them too and started backing toward the fence. "This doesn't have to end badly," he said. "We can still work something out. The only thing we're working out is how many years you're going to spend in prison." The police cars pulled into my driveway, and I heard car doors slamming and footsteps running around the side of the house. Pierce looked like a trapped animal, his eyes darting between me and the approaching officers. "Freeze! Police!" Pierce raised his hands and dropped to his knees as 2 officers entered the backyard with their weapons drawn. Within minutes, he was handcuffed and sitting in the back of a patrol car while I gave my statement to Detective Williams, the same cop who'd taken the vandalism report the day before. "This is the same guy you suspected of slashing your tires?" she asked. "Same guy. And this time you caught him red-handed. What do you think he was after?" I thought about the files in my office safe, the evidence that could destroy not just Pierce but potentially several other people who'd been involved in his various schemes over the years. He probably wanted to destroy some documents that might be embarrassing to him. What kind of documents? The kind that prove he's been running marriage fraud scams for 15 years. Detective Williams raised an eyebrow. "That's a serious accusation." "It's a serious crime, and I've got serious evidence." I spent the next 2 hours at the police station, providing a detailed statement about Pierce's attempted burglary and his history of targeting married women. Detective Williams was particularly interested in the connection to Hazel and the real estate scheme. "So, your wife was working with this guy to force you to sell your property?" "That's right. They created a shell company specifically for that purpose." "And you have documentation of this?" "Boxes of it." "We're going to need to see those documents." I called Brooks and had him bring copies of everything we'd compiled. By noon, the police had enough evidence to charge Pierce with attempted burglary, stalking, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The district attorney was reviewing the case for additional federal charges. But Pierce still had one card left to play. I was driving home from the police station when my phone rang. It was Hazel. "Pierce is in jail," she said without preamble. "I know. I'm the one who put him there." "He called me from the jail. He's furious, Wes. He's threatening to drag me down with him." "What do you mean?" "He says if he's going to prison, he's going to make sure I go with him. He's going to tell the police that the whole thing was my idea, that I seduced him into helping me steal your property." I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car, trying to process what she'd just told me. "Is that true?" "Of course it's not true. You've seen the evidence. You know he's been doing this for years." "But you did participate willingly." "Yes, but—" "Wes, if he convinces them that I was the mastermind, I could go to prison too. What would happen to Emma and Sophie?" That was a good question. Our daughters were both in college, but they were still financially dependent on us. If both their parents ended up in prison, their lives would be destroyed. "What do you want me to do about it?" "I want you to help me. I know I don't deserve it. I know I've betrayed your trust, but I'm begging you. Don't let him destroy our daughters' lives to save himself." I sat in my car for a long time, staring at my house and thinking about the past 24 hours. Pierce was in jail, the immediate threat was over, and I had enough evidence to ensure he stayed there for a very long time. But Hazel was right about one thing. If she went to prison too, it would devastate Emma and Sophie. "Meet me at the house," I said finally. "We need to talk." 20 minutes later, Hazel was sitting in my living room looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. She'd been crying again, and her hands were shaking as she tried to drink the coffee I'd made for her. "Tell me exactly what Pierce said," I told her. "He said the police had offered him a plea deal if he cooperated and provided information about co-conspirators." He said he was going to tell them that I approached him with the idea of stealing your property, that I manipulated him into helping me. Can he prove that? He has text messages, emails, phone records. He's been documenting everything from the beginning, probably as insurance in case something like this happened. But the messages show the truth, don't they? That he initiated contact, that he came up with the plan? Some of them do, but others make it look like I was the driving force behind the scheme. He was careful about how he phrased things, always making it seem like I was the one pushing for action. I thought about the deleted messages I'd recovered from Hazel's phone. Most of them had shown Pierce as the instigator, but there had been a few where Hazel seemed enthusiastic about the plan, even eager to move forward. How much trouble are you in? I don't know. My lawyer says it depends on how the prosecutor interprets the evidence. If they believe Pierce's version of events, I could be looking at 5 to 10 years. And if they believe your version, maybe probation, maybe a suspended sentence, but either way, my legal career is over. We sat in silence for a while, two people who'd once shared everything now trying to navigate the wreckage of our relationship. Finally, I made a decision. I'll help you, I said. What? I'll help you. I'll testify about what I found, about Pierce's history of targeting married women. I'll make sure the prosecutor understands that you were a victim, not a mastermind. Why would you do that? Because despite everything that's happened, I don't want to see you go to prison. And because Emma and Sophie don't deserve to have both their parents destroyed by this mess. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. There are conditions. What kind of conditions? You're going to plead guilty to conspiracy charges and accept whatever sentence the prosecutor offers. You're going to cooperate fully with the investigation into Pierce's other victims, and you're going to sign divorce papers that give me full custody of the lake house and protection from any future claims on my assets. And in exchange? In exchange, I'll make sure the prosecutor knows that Pierce was the mastermind and you were just a pawn in his game. She nodded slowly. That's fair. One more thing, Hazel. After this is over, after the trial and the divorce and all the legal proceedings, I want you to disappear from my life completely. No contact except through lawyers, no attempts to reconcile, no showing up at family events uninvited. We're done. I understand. Do you? Because this is it, Hazel. This is the last time I'm ever going to help you, the last time I'm going to trust you, the last time I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. After this, you're on your own. I understand, she repeated. I called my lawyer and arranged a meeting for the next day. Then I called Detective Williams and told her I had additional information about Pierce Eldrow's criminal history that might be relevant to the case. Over the next week, I spent countless hours with prosecutors, FBI agents, and investigators, providing testimony and documentation that painted Pierce as a serial predator who'd been targeting vulnerable women for years. The evidence was overwhelming, and Pierce's attempt to shift blame to Hazel fell apart under scrutiny. In the end, Pierce pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted burglary. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution to his victims. Hazel pleaded guilty to a single count of conspiracy and received 3 years of probation. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. Hazel kept the house and half our savings, but I retained full ownership of the lake house and my business. She moved to another state and started working for a nonprofit organization, having lost her law license as part of her plea agreement. Emma and Sophie were devastated by the divorce, but they eventually came to understand that their mother had made serious mistakes that had consequences. They still see her occasionally, but they live with me now, and we're slowly rebuilding our family without the lies and deception that had poisoned it for so long. As for me, I kept the lake house. I go there most weekends now, sitting on the old dock where my father taught me to fish, watching the sun set over the water. The cabin is still small and outdated, but it's mine, and no one can ever take it away from me. Sometimes I think about Pierce, sitting in his federal prison cell, probably planning his next scam for when he gets out. Sometimes I think about Hazel, trying to rebuild her life in a new city where nobody knows about her past. But mostly, I try not to think about either of them at all, because the truth is, I'm better off without them. I'm better off without the lies, the manipulation, the constant wondering if the person I trusted most in the world was plotting against me. I'm better off alone than I ever was with someone who saw me as nothing more than a means to an end. The lake house is quiet now, peaceful in a way it never was when I was worried about losing it. The water laps gently against the dock, the pine trees whisper in the breeze, and my father's memory rests undisturbed in the place where he belonged. And that's exactly how it should be.